Arkansas's Nick Smith Jr. is officially entering the NBA draft, so where is his stock at? This is Floor and Ceiling, let's break him down. Nick Smith was in my preseason top 10 at 6'5". With his scoring and passing, I saw him as a prototypical NBA guard, but his up and down year has resulted in more questions than answers. On offense, I want to begin with what has become sort of his signature shot. This runner or floater is definitely Smith's go-to. It has advantages as well as drawbacks, but I'm very impressed by just how comfortable the Arkansas guard is rising into this touch shot. His freshman season was hampered by ongoing knee issues, so Smith wasn't always able to get on the court. He played just 438 total minutes, but whenever Smith suited up, you were guaranteed to see this floater. It's a big part of how he scored 12 points a game. In particular, I want to focus on that Smith can use this to attack closeouts like we see here, or he can use it out of pick and rolls. I think those two areas will be his main uses in the NBA, so it's great that he has these finishes in his arsenal. Really, you can tell that Smith has spent hours working on this ever since he was in high school. His in-between game is really encouraging for a teenager. He gets into this shot on the hop and in rhythm, usually on balance, and the Razorbacks prospect also has some versatility to his floater. Smith is able to go up off 1 foot or both feet. He turns to this shot really often, so it's important that he gives defenses different looks. But in fact, he might be turning to this floater too often. Now, in other videos, I'm always adamant, ball handlers should have some sort of in-between game. They're going to be in lots of situations where they're between their defender and the big, so pulling up into a 2, a floater, a runner, or a push shot makes a lot of sense. This is also useful in the playoffs when games really grind down to a halt and you have to score against set defenses. However, Smith uses this shot so much in my opinion because he's really averse to playing in traffic or through contact right now. There's no way to sugarcoat it. The dilemma with Smith is his awful inefficiency all season as a freshman. He made around 37% of his field goals, and his 47% true shooting percentage is just really poor. Now, that's not only on Smith, but what I'm focusing on right now is more so an individual situation that's gonna need to be addressed at the next level. Smith tries to get into this floater almost every single time that he gets downhill. Often, he doesn't even get all the way to the basket because of this over-reliance. In turn, this means that he's taking a lot of tough shots, and those will become even more difficult when he faces NBA length and athleticism. So while I like that Smith can rise into this touch shot in multiple ways, this cannot be the only thing that he turns to. Overall, I'll be looking to see some strides from Smith when it comes to his finishing. Still, we do have to be careful. We're dealing with tiny sample sizes here and across the board for the rest of this video. Smith barely played, and he also didn't really play fully healthy, which I cannot stress enough how that must be taken into account. But with that context also comes the tape, and there's some clear improvement areas for the Arkansas guard. Smith only took 35 shots at the rim, which is not good enough. He made 57%, which also is not very good. Again, it goes back to his apprehension to play in traffic down low. But also, Smith is a wiry 185 pounds. He has to get stronger. In truth, he's probably a little bit better of an athlete than he showed this season. For instance, he can get up and dunk, and I think he has pretty good body control, but he will have to bulk up to get into and over defenders instead of almost always trying to finish from below the rim. A lot of the time, he's trying these contortion, acrobatic layups because of that. Going forward, the number one thing is that Smith's volume at the basket has to shoot up. There are elite guards who don't get to the rim that much, but they're then really efficient from the mid-range or from 3. As we'll get into, Smith has not shown that yet. Something that comes to mind is that I'd love to see Smith use his change of pace more often. He usually needs a ball screen right now to create separation, but he has a solid enough second gear that he can switch into to cause his defender some issues. Again, we see that here, going back to his North Little Rock days. I also believe that Smith is going to look better after a healthy offseason, and like I usually say with NBA spacing, he's someone who needs time to charge up and gather momentum. That is also why I trust him more in transition than against a set defense right now. That way, Smith isn't having to deal with too much length or additional bodies. Getting to the rest of Smith's scoring, the hope is that he can develop into a 3-level guard who can also handle the ball, but who's probably always going to prioritize getting a bucket. We've seen some flashes over the year. Smith loves taking 2-point jumpers, they make up almost half of his shot diet, but this probably doesn't look that extreme at the next level, just through a combination of context and playing more minutes. Still, it's clear Smith does prefer these jumpers to a certain extent. And the other and biggest elephant in the room, again, Smith just shot the ball very poorly this season. He made just 1/3 of his 2-point jumpers, which is not viable long-term for either him or his team. So obviously that number will need to improve significantly. Like we've been seeing, this is his biggest question mark. I like the looks that he gets, but then they just don't go in. Eventually, I'm sure teams would love to have Smith flying off elbow actions or things of that nature, but the results haven't been there. Still, I do feel more positive about his scoring than the numbers would have you believe. Overall, I think he's bound to become a good shooter. He's definitely better than what he showed at Arkansas at least, coming off injuries and lacking rhythm. Maybe Smith doesn't have the cleanest stroke, but I think he's going to be able to drill these shots consistently in the future. Smith has good size at around 6'5", so he can elevate over switches or outstretched arms. He gets nice elevation on his jumper, usually has pretty good pace, and his mechanics are fairly fluid and balanced. Usually, Smith prefers going right while using the screen, but he also has some shake with side steps and step backs, although again, his conversion rate on these must go up. Smith creates most of his jumpers from 2, but out to 3, all but 2 of his 24 makes have been assisted. We've seen some signs of him chaining moves together though, so this is something I'll be monitoring as he makes a step up to the next level. Really though, I think this is more about Smith's role at Arkansas. The Razorbacks had a prospect-loaded squad, but a lot of them are still developing and are not yet dependable shooters from 3. So when Smith returned and played, there was a huge onus on him having to be the one to space the floor. The Arkansas native shot 34% from 3, which isn't great, but his spacing and context were not favorable. Again, this is also only on 71 shots. So my biggest takeaway is how Smith can operate off the ball. He's going to be able to play next to a primary ball handler in the NBA, be it a guard or a bigger wing type. But looking ahead, I still have some questions about his versatility and range from 3. Right now, Smith is at his best when he's simply spotting up, but I haven't seen him be that impactful out of handoffs, a live dribble, etc. Arkansas tried using Smith as a movement shooter here and there, but I'm not sure his shot lends itself to that right now. He's got good touch and a fluid stroke, but can still streamline some of the moving pieces. Along with that, his shot selection sometimes isn't the best, but I also think his lack of rhythm played a factor there. Smith was also short on a lot of his misses, which could be because of those ongoing knee issues, or because his range needs to expand. Smith just doesn't really take that many deep threes. Still, while Smith's pull-up game ideally develops, he'll be useful spotting up, and I think he'll bring value offensively off the ball in other ways as well. He shared the floor with Anthony Black and Ricky Council a lot at Arkansas, so he's used to this, and I think it makes sense to give it continuity because I see Smith as a true combo guard. Smith understands when to give up the ball and cut hard. He'll dive to the cup with intent, and he understands when to get behind the defense. Being comfortable doing this off the ball means that Smith can slot in next to another ball handler who commands more attention. In other words, Smith can play next to a big star. Even if this didn't always show up at Arkansas, I think he's very scalable with how he can spot up or cut when he doesn't have the ball in his hands. Ideally, you'll get him running into movement threes as well, and then once those go in, he can attack closeouts and spaces with his floater or pull-up. I see Smith as a combo guard rather than as a point guard target because I'm not sure about his ball handling, feel, and creativity. In all fairness, this was tougher to gauge because of his limited time at Arkansas. Smith had 29 assists and 27 turnovers, so you can't really come to any conclusions from just that. But in terms of what I observed beyond the numbers, Smith's handle still looks high and loose. The Razorbacks guard doesn't get too low with the ball, and he can still be slightly careless, so the rock can get picked off from him. This is all fixable, and even though Smith's not the fastest or most explosive, I think he'll have an easier time getting past defenders in the pros once he has more space, but especially once his handle improves. And if he's ever to truly develop into more of a point guard rather than a secondary or tertiary ball handler like I see him now, Smith is going to have to become more comfortable in the pick and roll. This was mostly Anthony Black and Ricky Council's job at Arkansas, so I'm not reading too much into these clips, but from what I saw, Smith's technique has to keep getting better. He's prone to mistiming his passes or miscommunicating with his teammates. That can't happen at the point. And then his reads, they're usually fine for the most part, but his execution can be lacking in terms of weight and placement. However, as I said, Smith does have 29 assists, so as of now, I think his facilitating lends itself much more to yet again being that secondary ball handler. Smith is at his best when he doesn't have to read the entire defense, which is why he's been productive in transition, for example. Smith can just grab and go, jet down the floor, and make a decision against 1 or 2 defenders rather than 5. In particular, the Razorbacks guard is pretty fun creating lobs. This has also shown up in the half court, mostly attacking closeouts, such as here when he disguises the pass. Or it's a similar situation here. Smith attacks the closeout from the pass and ends up with the assist. On defense, the important thing for me is that you're never really going to be building your defense around Nick Smith or drafting him because of his defensive upside. Like, even if his best offensive outcome hits, there will likely be other guys on the roster who are more important defensively in terms of scheme, strengths, and even weaknesses. Think of Smith maybe like a Kyrie Irving, who isn't necessarily recognized as a good defender, but he's usually done enough on that end, and his offense makes up for any points he'll give up. Of course, Smith is a far ways away from this offensively, but this is an ideal outcome. For now though, I'm mostly fine with Smith's defense. I recognize that he has some disadvantages that are just sort of built in because of his strength and athleticism, but I think Smith is a smart defender whose motor is inconsistent, but he can compete. The Arkansas prospect will close out and he'll stay disciplined, he'll contest and fight to keep his man in front, which is not to say that he's doing any of this at a high level per se, but I'm also confident that it's not at a low level. In the NBA, I expect that Smith is going to strictly be a positional defender, probably defending the guard who's the least constantly involved of the other teams 1 and 2. Of course, there are just certain things that Smith can't really overcome on this end. The biggest for me is his lack of strength. I touched on his narrow frame earlier, a $185 if that, so he has to keep getting stronger. But even then, Smith will always be on the wiry side, so there's certain strength mismatches that I think are just bound to happen. His height at 6'5", like I've been saying, is pretty solid, but Smith never plays bigger than that, which means that you're not going to be switching him onto wings or forwards of any type. And finally, his lack of strength factors into this directly, but Smith is only an alright athlete. He's fluid, not powerful, so that will restrict his defensive production. I considered Nick Smith Jr. to be a potential top 10 pick in preseason. Now the entire season has gone by and things didn't really go as planned. However, I'm still pretty high on Smith. I think that his NBA translation is about as high of any prospect in this draft. Now, I have clear concerns about his finishing at the rim. He's not really getting there. He takes too many floaters. He's not strong enough. And then obviously from everywhere else on the floor, his efficiency has just been poor. But I think in a different context, I think once he's fully healthy, I think once he is able to play with more spacing, he's really going to be coming alive. Nick Smith, with his game, with his jumper, with his touch, I don't really have any concerns about the poor shooting percentages right now. I think those are bound to improve. And then if he is playing that more of a combo guard role, whose job is to attack closeouts with his floater and pull-up, who can improve at the rim, can hopefully get to the line a little bit more. Hopefully his versatility as a movement shooter improves, and then he's able to make some reads, attacking closeouts in transition and getting into the paint. I think that's enough for him to be a very, very valuable offensive player in the NBA. As always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like. Make sure to leave a comment, tell me what you think of Nick Smith Jr. And as always, if you enjoy the channel, make sure to subscribe. Take care, and I'll catch you guys next time.